Hey guys, tonight we're headed deep into the jungle, humid, fragrant, buzzing with life, to watch something small and unassuming change the world forever. But quietly, no thunder, no wars, no declarations, just a simple seed, shaded by the canopy, waiting for someone to notice it. The trees around you don't boast. Their pods are a strange shade, somewhere between rust and plum, and they hang right off the trunk, like they forgot how branches work. This is cacao, and it's not chocolate yet, not even close. It's warm here, not uncomfortably so, but thick, with a moist stillness. You move slowly, because there's no other way. That fan of banana leaves you just brushed past, left a stripe of water down your arm. You ignore it and keep walking. Around you, birds call in low chirps and occasional clicks. A pair of howler monkeys complain softly from the trees above, as if the jungle's mood doesn't match their own. The Mayan people didn't just stumble across chocolate, they lived inside its ecosystem. Cacao trees thrive in the shade of taller trees, and they need very specific conditions: shade, moisture, warmth, and just the right pollinators. There's a beautiful irony there. The world's most beloved sweet begins its life in conditions most crops can't tolerate. It hides, it waits, it grows quietly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this sleepy little history project travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through a soft clearing now. The canopy opens just slightly, and you can see the broad leaves of cacao trees in better detail. The pods grow in clusters. They aren't overly glossy or showy. No scent wafts from them. They're easy to overlook. That's the point. This wasn't a crop designed to attract human attention. It was designed to blend into a world already rich with life, long before the Maya transformed cacao into chocolate. These trees served as part of the ecosystem's gentle, persistent rhythm. Squirrels and monkeys gnawed on the pulp inside the pods. Rodents scattered the seeds. And buried in this everyday animal behavior was the very beginning of something sacred. Historians still argue whether early Mesoamerican cultures cultivated cacao first for its pulp or its seeds. But the Mayans weren't rushing to invent dessert. At first, cacao was probably enjoyed for the sweet mucilage, the soft, tangy white flesh that surrounds each bitter bean. Fermenting that pulp produced a mildly alcoholic beverage. It was pleasant enough, not revolutionary, but once fermentation was complete, the seeds, the ones usually tossed aside, took on something new, a bitterness that intrigued rather than repelled. You crouch near one of the trees now. A young boy passes by with a woven basket, stopping at each pod with practiced calm. He taps them gently. He's listening, not for sound exactly, but for that subtle shift in weight and density that tells him the pod is ready. Then, with a curved blade, he cuts one free. It doesn't fall. He catches it in his hand, setting it carefully into the basket beside others. He never rushes. He knows the trees, and the trees know him. Cacao, at this early point in Maya culture, wasn't yet processed. It wasn't yet ground into paste or frothed into sacred drinks. But the awareness had begun. The link between people and plant was forming. slowly, gently, a relationship of mutual offering. The tree gave fruit. The people noticed. That was enough. You sit on a carved stone nearby and watch as an elder splits open a pod. Inside, the beans glisten with their soft white pulp. He scoops one out and places it in your hand. It's sticky, cool, tangy on the tongue, tropical, yes, but also slightly musky, like lychee and lemon had a secret meeting under the cover of rainforest. You wouldn't call this chocolate yet, but it's part of the story. The beginning, before flavor profiles, before cocoa butter percentages, before the word chocolate even existed, there was this moment. A curious person, a seed, a choice to keep tasting. It's humbling, in a way, that a food now synonymous with indulgence began in such quiet surroundings. No sugar, no wrappers, no shelves of confections, just trees, fruit, and human observation. No one was asking for dessert, but the forest was offering a riddle, one that would take centuries to solve. You lean back. The sun cuts through the canopy in slender beams. A bird calls once, twice, then settles. The boy with the basket walks past you again, and this time he smiles. You follow the boy through the jungle now, soft footfalls pressing into damp earth, as he heads toward the village with his basket of freshly harvested cacao pods. He doesn't speak much, just hums a little tune that drifts into the background like wind slipping between tree trunks. You notice the rhythm of daily life here isn't loud. It moves in cycles, in rituals, in things repeated gently over time. By the time he reaches the village, the air smells different. Smoke curls upward from clay chimneys. Children dart between thatched huts. Someone is grinding maize. Someone else is slicing fruit. It's peaceful, but never idle. There's always something being made. A group gathers around a mat beneath the shade of a ceiba tree. They're not roasting the cacao beans yet. First comes something older, more instinctive. They slice open the pods and scrape out the pulp, slippery and shining. The beans are tossed into a shallow vessel, but no one's paying them much attention. It's the pulp they want. It's juicy, lightly fermented, and when poured into clay vessels and left for a few days, it produces a faintly alcoholic drink. This was likely the first way cacao was consumed. Historians still argue whether the seeds themselves held any significance early on, but this pulp beverage was refreshing, easy to make, and shared communally. You sit on the edge of the group, a cool bowl passed to you. The taste is strange at first, like the jungle decided to bottle its humidity and serve it chilled. There's a tang that wakes your tongue but doesn't linger, just a quiet spark before it disappears again. Nearby, someone points to the beans drying in the sun. At first, they were just a byproduct, but fermentation changes things. The mucilage breaks down. The bitter compounds in the beans soften slightly. The beans begin to smell, not good exactly, but interesting, earthy, slightly floral, a little nutty. It's unclear exactly when someone decided to take those fermented beans and roast them, but it had to begin with curiosity, with someone saying, well, we've already come this far. You watch as a few beans are crushed between stones, not ground into paste, just broken. The inside is darker now and smells stronger. Someone holds one up to you. You chew it hesitantly, bitter, so bitter, but not just bitter, There's a hint of depth beneath the sharpness, something that lingers on your teeth like a story half told. You lie back in the shade and let the sounds of the village lull you. Wind rustles the palm fronds overhead. Laughter drifts in and out, mixed with the dull clinking of ceramic bowls. There's no urgency here. The journey from seed to flavor isn't rushed. It's coaxed, gently, like a child learning to speak. Cacao wasn't just food, it was part of the rhythm of life, gathered during certain seasons, shared in ceremonies, slowly understood over generations. It wasn't invented overnight. The way a new tool might be, it was revealed piece by piece, cup by cup. Someone calls from across the courtyard. A girl holds up a gourd of thickened pulp drink, laughing as it dribbles down her chin. Her grandmother swats at her playfully, then joins her with a smile. You sip again from your own bowl. The taste is starting to grow on you. Still strange, still wild, but now familiar enough that your body stops flinching at its unfamiliar tang. It's easy to forget in our world of sweet bars and sugar-dusted truffles. That chocolate started here, not as indulgence, but as observation. It came not from craving, but from attention. A plant offering its strange gifts, a people willing to keep tasting. You hear a soft drumming in the distance. It's not music, not yet, just someone preparing a fire, tapping wood on stone, but it has rhythm, like everything here. Even the way the cacao beans are left to ferment, gently stirred, never rushed. There's no word for mass production in this language. Every pod is opened by hand. Every bean is placed in the sun by fingers, not machines. The process is patient, like the trees. You sit a little longer, letting the moment steep. The pulp drink in your hand grows warmer as the sun climbs overhead. A breeze rustles through the banana trees. Somewhere behind you, a few dogs bark at a lazy iguana crossing the path. You smile. Even the animals here seem to respect the pace. You remember that first bite of the raw bean, the one that made you wince. It's still inside you, still working its way into your memory. Not quite delicious, but definitely unforgettable. The next morning, you're up early, though early here feels less like an hour and more like a texture in the air. Mist lingers low over the jungle floor. It smells like leaves, damp clay, and the faint sweetness of fermenting fruit. A gentle fire crackles nearby, and just beside it, a woman crouches with slow determination, roasting something in a broad, shallow clay pan. You walk closer. The heat reaches your cheeks before the scent hits your nose. But when it does, there's no going back. Roasting cacao doesn't smell like chocolate bars. Not yet. It smells like a storm warming up. Wood smoke, char, the edge of something bitter trying to soften. The beans pop faintly as the heat builds. A small child stirs them with a wooden paddle, careful not to let any burn. This is a roast done by memory, not thermometer. Historians still argue whether the Maya roasted their cacao lightly or darkly, whether the bitterness was embraced or tamed. But the goal wasn't sweetness. The Maya had other plans for these beans, sacred ones, social ones, and roasting was just the first step in the transformation. You sit beside the fire, cross-legged in the soft dirt. The roasted beans are poured into a wide vessel to cool. You pick one up, still warm, and rub it between your fingers. The outer shell flakes away like ash. Inside is the nib, the actual cacao. You bite it, slowly, still bitter, but different now. Deeper, smokier, a hint of something almost familiar. This, you realize, is where the magic begins. Roasting changes everything. It doesn't just improve flavor, it unlocks the scent, loosens the oils, prepares the nib for the next phase grinding. But before that, you sit with the quiet heat a little longer, listening to the beans crackle softly in the pan. You think about how carefully this has all been done, each step measured not in minutes, but in gestures. No timers, no recipes, just practice and memory, and repetition. The same way lullabies pass from voice to voice, so too does this process move through generations. When the beans have cooled, the grinding begins. But that's for later. Right now, you focus on the scent, not chocolatey in the modern sense, but dark, earthy, and oddly calming. It settles into your hair, your skin, even your thoughts begin to slow. You watch the woman feeding more beans into the pan, always in small batches. She tests them not by time, but by ear. That soft crack when the nib separates from the husk. The smell that rises at just the right pitch. It's a sensory art, one you're only beginning to understand. A fringe detail floats to mind. Some researchers believe cacao was once associated with the underworld in Maya mythology, its roots tangled with Xibalba, the land of the dead, a dark gift from a darker place. But the fire here doesn't feel ominous. It feels maternal, centering, like a hearth that never scolds, only warms. You glance across the clearing and see others beginning their morning routines. Someone braids a child's hair. Another smooths down woven mats. Everything happens slowly, yet nothing feels lazy. This is what happens when a culture isn't built on urgency. It's built on time, the long kind. Someone offers you a roasted bean wrapped in a leaf. You take it, nodding your thanks. It's small, but you eat it reverently, like a prayer. You're starting to get it now. This wasn't about making a treat. This was about making meaning. The fire flickers. A bird calls overhead. The woman beside you lifts her pan slightly, judging the heat from the stones. You realize she's not looking at the beans at all. She's watching the smoke, listening to its language, and she's fluent. Later in the morning, the fire has cooled and the air has shifted. Not much, just enough to carry a different scent, one that's softer, thicker. You rise and follow it to a shaded corner of the courtyard, where an older woman sits before a flat stone slab, her knees tucked neatly beneath her. A smaller stone, a roller, rests in her hands. She looks up and nods once, as if she's been expecting you. The metate is warm from the sun. She places a small pile of roasted cacao nibs at the top and slowly begins to grind. The motion is ancient, quiet, rhythmic, forward, back, not rushed, not hesitant, just steady, like breath. You sit beside her, and she doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. The scrape of stone on stone speaks plenty. The nibs resist at first. They crackle, crumble, break down. At first, they're gritty, like sand. Then, as the oils begin to release, something remarkable happens. The paste begins to darken, soften, shine. Chocolate, in its rawest, most honest form, begins to appear, not as a bar, not as sweetness, but as a thick, dark smear across a slab of stone. You try it. It's intense, bitter, but textured and alive. You taste smoke, earth, astringency. You taste time, no sugar, no milk, just cacao, coaxed into yielding its essence through patience and strength. Grinding cacao was traditionally women's work in Maya culture, but don't confuse that with simplicity. This was an act of deep labor, strength, and respect. The metate was a tool of transformation, and this act, done daily by thousands of hands across generations, was as sacred as any temple ritual. Historians still argue whether early Maya ever sweetened their chocolate, or if its bitterness was not only accepted but celebrated. There are depictions of honey being added, sure, but they're rare, more often. The emphasis was on balance, adding chili or maize or flowers, not to cover the bitterness, but to dance with it. The woman beside you now scoops the paste into a bowl with a wide, practiced hand. It pools like ink. Then she begins to portion it out, pressing small rounds onto leaves for drying. Some will be kept for ceremony. Some will be used for daily drinks. A few may be traded to neighbors. None will be wasted. You're invited to try grinding. You grip the stone roller, its weight surprising. It humbles you as you begin the motion. The rhythm feels unnatural. Your arms want to rush, your hands want to finish, but the stone disagrees. It demands slowness. It teaches by resisting. You find the groove, eventually, and the paste begins to form beneath your touch. This is how knowledge passes, one ache at a time. You catch a glimpse of a carved glyph nearby. It shows a deity, mid-motion, pouring chocolate from one vessel to another. But even gods in Maya culture weren't above the task of grinding. Chocolate wasn't a luxury, it was a bridge between worlds. A small girl watches you. She holds a half-formed cacao disc in her hands and mimics your movements. You smile, and she copies that too. Her grandmother laughs from behind her, amused, but not unkind. You realize this moment has happened before, not this exact one. Of course, but the arc of it. An outsider watching, a learner trying, a tradition continuing. One quirky detail catches your attention. Some metates were decorated with animal legs, jaguar paws, turtle feet, suggesting that even the tools had personalities, had presence. You look down at the one before you. It's simple, undecorated, but it feels alive all the same. Its surface glistens faintly in the light, like a quiet mirror. As you finish your turn, your arms ache in a way that feels honest, earned. You hand the roller back with reverence. The woman nods again, and this time, her smile lingers. The next step is strangely theatrical, but not for show. It's practical, sacred, and sensory all at once. You follow the older woman again, this time to a low bench near a wide-mouthed clay vessel. Another sits beside it, a twin in size but slightly chipped. Between them, a small boy stands poised like a priest at an altar. He lifts a gourd filled with the chocolate paste, thinned now with water, and with a practiced motion, begins to pour from one vessel to the other. High, very high, so high you instinctively tense, waiting for it to spill, but it doesn't. The stream of liquid falls in a dark, velvety ribbon, hitting the second pot with a slosh and a fifth, that telltale hiss of foam beginning to rise. He lifts the gourd again, pours it back into the first, back and forth, over and over. The longer he does this, the more foam gathers on the surface, thick, rich, and, in Maya tradition, utterly essential. You've heard of foamed milk, cappuccinos, maybe even egg white cocktails. But this is different. This foam isn't for decoration. It's the soul of the drink. The foam was believed to carry the essence of the cacao, its aroma, its strength, its spiritual weight. Some believed that without it, the drink was lifeless. With it, it was sacred. You're handed a small bowl. The foam clings to the rim like clouds edging a mountain peak. It shimmers slightly, brown, but almost golden where it thins. You take a sip. It's thick, but not cloying. Bitter still, but rounder now, and carried by something more. The foam softens the edges. The drink feels alive. Historians still debate the exact ingredients used by the Maya in their ceremonial cacao drinks. We know that water and cacao were base elements, but beyond that, the additions varied wildly. Chili peppers were common, honey occasionally. A flower called Rosita de Cacao sometimes made its way in, lending a gentle aroma. There are references to annatto, allspice, even fermented corn. The boy beside you now sprinkles something into the bowl, finely ground chili, just a pinch. He stirs it once and offers you another sip. It burns a little, just the edges of your mouth, just enough to wake up the nerves. It's a beautiful contradiction, bitterness softened by foam, fire edged with cool clay. You understand now why this wasn't just food. This was medicine. This was metaphor. You watch as the vessels are emptied, filled again, emptied once more. There's no waste. Even the foam clinging to the sides is scraped down, stirred back in, refoamed. You think about how many modern recipes tell you to skim off foam, to remove the imperfection. But here, the foam is the goal. The imperfection is perfection. That's nice. Isn't it nearby? A group of elders sit in a circle, bowls in hand. They speak softly, not in gossip, not in command, just in observation. This drink, for them, isn't a treat. It's a conversation, a prayer, a pause. One elder speaks, and the others nod. You can't understand the words, but you understand the rhythm. It feels like memory passed aloud. Chocolate, here, isn't served alone. It always arrives with company, shared under trees, around fires, between generations. No vending machines, no foil wrappers, just this liquid, foam, and time. You notice now that the foam lingers on your lips long after you've set down the bowl. It's not just flavor, it's texture, sensation, presence. It stays with you like a good story or an old melody. One odd little fact pops into your head in some Maya city-states. Records show that the frothiest bowls of chocolate were reserved for nobility, especially women, royal women, priestesses. The foam, in some places, was status. But here, no one hoards it. Even the children get a share. As the sun climbs, the bowls are emptied, rinsed, and set aside. The vessels are scrubbed clean, turned upside down on woven mats. No ceremony marks the end, just silence, and the faint scent of cacao hanging in the air, blending now with dust and sun, and the steady rhythm of village life returning to its usual tasks. You lick the last foam from your lip and smile for something that began in the shadows of the forest. This drink now sits at the very heart of things. The village settles into its afternoon lull, yet the scent of cacao clings to everything. Your hair, your tunic, even the shallow breaths you take beneath the thatched roof of a communal kitchen. A low stone platform stands at the center, covered with small clay bowls, each holding something colorful, fragrant, or frankly mysterious. Think of it as the world's first chocolate mixologist station, minus the ironic mustaches and craft apron selfies. One bowl glows sunset red dried chili chiltepine, crushed into flakes so fine they look like volcanic dust. Another shines golden from wild honey that oozes as slowly as tree sap. A third holds jagged shards of a seed you recognize only by scent. Vanilla orchid pods, cured black and glossy in the jungle sun. Close by sits a natto, those tiny ruby seeds ancient cooks used more for color than flavor, though it sneaks in a faint nuttiness if you pay attention. And at the edge, half in shadow, coils a twist of cured tobacco leaf, because someone in every community insists. Try this once. You'll either thank me or never forgive me. A middle-aged woman with laugh lines and smoke-stained fingertips gestures for you to sit. She lays out 3 painted cups. The first receives pure cacao paste and warm water. She stirs until the liquid turns a deep matte brown. Into the second, she ladles the same base but adds 2 generous spoonfuls of honey. Into the third, she drops a thumb-sized chili flake bouquet and stirs only twice, as if to warn, handle with respect. You watch, fascinated by how casually she customizes history. Mainstream scholars agree that by the classic Maya period, roughly 250 to 900 CE, cacao drinks were rarely served plain. Archaeochemical studies of residue on ancient vessels routinely detect traces of chili, honey, and vanilla. That's the sober fact. But the woman beside you would frame it differently. Our ancestors were bored with plain bitter, so they turned the forest into a spice rack. Same conclusion, more attitude. She pushes the honey cup toward you first, a diplomatic choice. The sweetness lands softly on your tongue, then melts into a mellow chocolate bass note. It's comforting, like discovering the jungle keeps its own stash of childhood desserts. You manage a polite nod, and she grins, as though she's heard that reaction from every wide-eyed traveler since stele were trendy. Next comes the chili cup. One sip, and quiet heat blooms along your gums before diving straight for the back of your throat. Your eyes widen, she laughs. Don't gulp, she says, in a tone that translates across any language. Too late. Still, after the burn subsides, the cacao tastes brighter, almost playful, as if fire unlocked a hidden melody. Historians still argue whether chili served purely for flavor or if it doubled as a mild stimulant, keeping elites alert during long ceremonies. Either way, you suspect ancient palates were braver than most modern taste buds, armed only with marshmallows and nostalgia. For the finale, she picks up a small clay censer, drops in a pebble of copal resin, and fans it gently with a palm frond. The smoke curls like pale silk, weaving through afternoon light, with a swift motion that borders on magic. She inverts an empty cup over the censer, capturing the smoke inside. After a few heartbeats, she rights the cup, pours in chocolate, stirs once, and passes it over. Drink the incense, she says. Not a metaphor. You do, and it tastes, well, how memory feels, a moment half dreamed, half remembered, scented with pine, citrus, and the hush of temple corridors. Copal-infused chocolate was never mainstream, yet pottery shards with charred resin traces show someone, somewhere, liked their cacao extra smoky, call it the world's earliest craft beer phase, minus the pretentious tasting notes, though you're dangerously close to providing some. A joke flickers across your mind, if modern cafes rediscovered copal smoked mochas. Hipsters would line up faster than you can say single origin. You keep that quip to yourself. Instead, you take another slow sip, letting the flavors settle. Across the courtyard, two teenagers argue about spice ratios. One demands more chili, the other insists honey balances bitterness better. Their grandmother cuts in with a fringe tidbit. Some villages once blended crushed ear flour. Yes, an actual edible fungus, shaped like a tiny ear, into cacao during medicinal rituals. The boys pull faces. You nearly spit out your drink. Fungi flavored chocolate may never trend, but it proves that experimentation isn't a 21st century invention. Somewhere, a Maya cook centuries ago probably said, "Trust me, this will either heal your cold or ruin your week, but we'll know by sunrise. You help grind more spices, each motion echoing yesterday's stone on stone rhythm. Your arms remember, your shoulders complain anyway. A light joke slips free at this rate." Modern gym memberships could be replaced with daily meditate sessions. The woman cackles, then reminds you that after a month, you'd finally earn the right to prepare cacao for a small festival. Humbling thought your biceps would look sculpted, but your pride might still wobble like unset foam. Evenings descend abruptly in the rainforest. Shadows stretch long and cool. The kitchen hearth crackles under fresh logs of zapote wood, releasing a scent half fruit, half vanilla, which coils through the cacao aroma in yet another improvisation. You notice a stack of dried cacao maize cakes near the fire, travel rations, ultra dense and bitter. One merchant will carry them tomorrow along the Sakbe, the raised limestone road that slips through jungle like a pale ribbon. That cake will be shaved into water at the next village, spiced to local taste, then passed along again, flavor as cultural passport. While she wraps the cakes in palm leaves, your host shares a final curiosity. Some glyphs depict cacao mixed with accio to achieve a deep red color, symbolic of blood. Certain royal rites required participants to drink red chocolate, visually embodying life force. You note the detail. Equal parts fascinated and relieved, your cup remains politely brown. Lightning bugs begin their slow choreography. A breeze gathers the kitchen's lingering smoke and carries it outward, as though inviting the entire jungle to take a sip. You raise your now lukewarm bowl, thank your teacher in halting Maya, and she touches her fingers to her forehead in blessing. Another voice in the dark remarks, half joking, that cacao alone might keep the gods from sending too much rain tonight. Everyone chuckles. Weather, apparently, has always made a terrific punchline. It's only when you step back into open air that you realize how layered the village smells. Cacao, copal, chili, honey, wet moss, warmed maize. They mingle, impossible to separate. A sensory footnote to every conversation, every memory. You think about your future self unwrapping a mass-produced chocolate bar, scanning the ingredients, and smirking at the absence of earflower fungus. Progress? Yes, yet also a little loss. As you walk toward your sleeping mat, the kitchen's glow recedes behind you. A bat swoops low, chasing insects drawn to torchlight. Your lips still tingle with chili. Your throat hums with smoke. Your pulse slips into sync with distant drums. Somewhere inside, the flavors keep arguing. Sweet, heat, earth, incense, each refusing to surrender. You suspect they never will. And that's the point. Morning arrives not with an alarm, but with bird song, sharp, curious notes that bounce across the trees like someone tapping on glass with a feather. You stretch, brush leaf crumbs from your tunic, and step out into golden light. There's still smoke in the air, faint and sleepy. The village stirs slowly, but something feels different. Today, you're not staying. Today, you're walking toward a palace. Well, not a palace in the Renaissance sense. No gilded banisters or powdered wigs. But it's still a place of authority, of ceremony, of fine stonework, and more than a few impressively judgmental jaguar statues. You're accompanying a messenger carrying a basket of dried cacao cakes. His tunic is clean, his hair tightly braided, and around his neck swings a carved pendant bearing a glyph you don't recognize. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, it's with the casual confidence of someone who knows exactly how much a single cup of chocolate is worth in the right context. You pass under a massive arch. Everything here is bigger, wider plazas, taller ceilings, polished floors, and more cacao. Bowls of it, buckets of it, tiny painted cups, giant lidded urns. If the village was quiet in its reverence, the palace is theatrical in its chocolate devotion. The court is not in session, but nobles mingle in shaded arcades, sipping from elegant vessels and debating something with slow, amused hand gestures. You edge closer to one group just in time to hear the tail end of an argument about whether wild vanilla clashes with crushed rose petal. A young scribe records the discussion as if it might someday save a dynasty. You're handed a cup before you ask for one. It's heavier than the village bowls, painted with scenes of myth, gods with curled snouts and headdresses that look like entire ecosystems. The chocolate inside is darker, richer, infused with something floral and unfamiliar. You sip and blink. This tastes ceremonial, not sweet, not fiery, just regal. Historians agree that cacao played a central role in Maya court life. It wasn't just a drink, it was a marker of elite identity. You could use it to pay taxes, hire labor, or secure a bride. Glyphs on palace vessels often show cacao as part of marriage contracts or diplomatic exchanges. A wedding toast, Maya style, may have been less champagne flute and more sacred cacao, frothed 5 times and garnished with marigold dust. The scribe beside you is young, but his hands move quickly across the bark paper codex. He's copying inventory cacao amounts received, portions prepared, flavors selected for various ranks. This isn't a cafeteria. It's more like a culinary temple. He whispers that today's batch is flavored with magnolia petals and a root that smells faintly of licorice. You raise an eyebrow. He nods, dead serious. You slip into the shade of a colonnade where a few priests are mid-discussion. One leans forward, stirring his chocolate with a carved stick, then gestures skyward while describing a vision he had during the last lunar eclipse. Something about a jaguar deity and the divine mixing bowl of the cosmos. The others listen, nod, sip. Nobody finds this weird. The line between cacao and divinity here is very, very thin. One fringe detail the scribe shares, as a quiet aside, archaeologists have found royal tombs containing cacao residue inside elaborately sealed vessels, suggesting chocolate wasn't just for life, but an essential companion in death. You make a mental note if you ever cross over to the underworld. It might help to arrive with a foamy offering. Later in the afternoon, a ceremony begins. It's not grand, just precise. A woman in finely woven robes, her hair wrapped in red-dyed cloth, steps forward with a steaming bowl. She lifts it high, turns slowly, and pours a little onto the temple floor, an offering. The scent, intense and bitter, rises as steam from sun-warmed stone. The gods get the first sip. Then, in practiced order, the bowls move down the line. Elders first, then warriors, then the scribes and apprentices. You find yourself at the end, cup in hand once more. The taste is smoky, barely sweet, thicker than before. You taste stone and pepper and something like wet leaves. It's not comforting, it's commanding. You're told this recipe dates back generations and is made only for moon festivals. The ingredients change depending on which god is honored for tonight's lunar rite. A flower that only blooms once a month has been boiled into the mix. No one knows its name. You ask why they use it anyway. Because we always have. Someone says that's enough. As evening falls, the nobles drift away, their robes trailing dust like shadows. You linger a moment, gazing at the murals on the palace walls. They show cacao trees growing from the cracked earth, their pods forming along god spines and human ribs alike, life and death, rooted in chocolate. You take one final sip, bow slightly, not to anyone in particular, just to the space itself, and follow the path back down toward the quieter village below. You return to the village just as twilight tucks itself into the trees, and someone presses a cloth pouch into your hand. It jingles softly, not with coins. There are no coins here, but with something far more valuable, dried cacao beans. You open the pouch and stare. Each bean is light, feathered with cracks, like a tiny seed of midnight. It doesn't seem like much, but here, in this world, you're essentially holding a wallet, a modest one, maybe, but enough to buy a rabbit, a cloak, or a few days' worth of food if you're careful. Cacao as currency, it's real and widely accepted. In fact, the idea of money as shiny metal would have confused many Maya traders. What could you do with silver but cacao? You could drink it, trade it, offer it to the gods, or just carry it around and jingle it discreetly when your crush walked by. Historians still debate how formal this cacao economy was, whether there were exchange rates, or if values shifted wildly between city-states. But the record is clear. Cacao beans were used in transactions large and small. In market murals and merchant glyphs, tiny beans are passed from hand to hand, counted, and tucked into pouches like this one. You trail a traveling merchant now, his pace unhurried but steady. His pack is well balanced, his walking stick smooth with use. At each stop, he barters, a few beans for smoked fish, a handful more for a woven mat. He haggles gently, never raising his voice. The trade is social. Negotiation here is almost an art form. At one stall, a vendor displays tiny carved cacao bean counters, wooden tokens shaped like the real thing, used for tallying larger deals. It's adorable, and also evidence of the bean's central place in economic life. You buy one just for fun. You pay in real cacao. Of course, irony isn't lost on you. Later, the merchant stops at a small clearing and kneels to offer a few beans on a woven cloth before a tiny stone shrine. It's not elaborate, just a few river stones and a smoothed idol, barely knee-high. But it's a reminder that cacao wasn't just money, it was meaningful. Even economic exchanges were spiritual acts. You pay the gods, and they don't give change. Nearby, a child recites a counting song to memorize the value of cacao. 1 bean buys a tamale, 3 beans a rabbit, 10 beans a night in the communal lodging house with extra blankets and a polite request not to snore. The numbers aren't exact. They're remembered, retold, flexible enough for rain, drought, or a particularly spicy batch of gossip. One quirky tidbit: archaeologists have found counterfeits. No, really, fake cacao beans made of clay, painted to look real. Some even had tiny bite marks, as if someone tested the goods before discovering they'd been duped. It's oddly comforting to know that even in the 8th century, someone was trying to cheat the system with monopoly money. You pass by a scribe carving glyphs into a thin bark paper codex. He's documenting a recent transaction between 2 nobles, a dowry involving hundreds of cacao beans and 3 feathered cloaks. The detail in his drawing is exquisite: every bean, every bowl, every braided knot of the garments. It's all there, because money, in this world, was visible, not stored in vaults or banks, but worn, sipped, and shared in the evening. A market festival begins. It's casual, just a few flutes, a drum, some dancing, but it glows with the kind of joy that can only come from successful trade. The woman who sold you the wooden bean invites you to join the dancing. You hesitate. She insists. You obey. Your moves are questionable at best, but your host shrugs and says, "It's not about rhythm, it's about circulation, like cacao." That makes you feel marginally better. The air smells of roasted maize and fire-roasted cacao. People snack on thin chocolate cakes spread with mashed banana. Others sip watered-down cacao from gourd ladles as they gossip under the stars. One man claims he once bought a canoe with cacao beans. Another swears his mother paid a midwife the same way. No one argues. These aren't wild tales. They're memory. As the night winds down, you sit cross-legged near the fire, your cloth pouch of beans resting on your lap. It's lighter now. You've spent some, given some away, but it still feels full of meaning, of flavor, of the quiet thrill that comes from carrying something ancient in your palm. You glance around and realize everyone has cacao. Some drink it, some trade it, some store it in woven baskets as if guarding their inheritance, and yet no one hoards it. That's the difference. Cacao is valuable because it moves, like water, like wind, like stories. You lean back on your hands, the earth still warm from the day. The stars blink overhead, and the fire crackles softly, as if chuckling at the very idea of coins. By morning, you're back in the quiet village. But today there's no ceremony, no courtyard debate, no palace fanfare. Today, cacao simply lives. You wake to the sound of soft footsteps and gentle conversation in the corner of a hut. A woman is already preparing a morning drink, cacao blended with maize and just a hint of honey. It's not indulgent. It's not even particularly strong. It's breakfast. You're handed a small gourd cup, warm to the touch, and sip before fully opening your eyes. The bitterness has dulled overnight, like embers smoldering low. What remains is comfort, familiarity. This is what cacao looks like when it's not ceremonial, when it's not monetary, when it's just part of the day. A grandmother sits near the doorway, stirring another pot of chocolate with a twig that looks older than the hut. She hums softly, not a song you recognize, but you catch the cadence 4 notes, repeat, 4 notes, repeat, like footsteps on an old path. Historians still argue whether cacao in its daily, non sacred form was primarily consumed as a food, a tonic, or simply a habit. But archaeological evidence shows that cacao residue appears in both humble village wares and ornate court goblets. In other words, chocolate belonged to everyone. Today, it belongs to this family. Children crouch around a bowl of cooled chocolate paste, dipping pieces of roasted squash into it like it's jungle fondue. A teenage boy leans over a low table, painting glyphs onto a birthday vessel with a fine brush made from bird feather and chewed reed. The design features 2 cacao pods on a vine, one open to reveal the beans, the other whole. New life, someone explains, and continuity. There's a funeral happening in a neighboring hut. No wailing, no drama, just visitors arriving slowly, respectfully. They bring bowls of chocolate, some plain, some mixed with herbs the deceased loved. These drinks are shared among mourners, not to mask grief, but to soften its edge. The warmth, the slight bitterness, the scent of earth, it's a reminder. Life continues, even now, later. There's a wedding announcement, not for today, next month, but the family is already preparing. The bride's relatives bring gifts fabric, shell jewelry, and, of course, cacao beans. They won't be part of the ceremony itself, not directly, but the beans will be used to flavor the communal drinks. Line the walkway with offerings, and fill the bowls of guests. It's a soft currency of celebration, quiet and deeply understood. One quirky fact you hear from a visiting auntie. Between sips of chocolate mixed with mint and river clay, some couples once exchanged cacao discs marked with symbols as betrothal tokens. If both partners broke their token and drank chocolate made from the halves, it was said the gods would smile on their union. Superstition, maybe, but charming enough that you make a mental note, just in case you ever time travel back for a date. The afternoon stretches lazy and slow. A few people doze under hammocks, their fingers still stained with cacao paste. You sit near a young girl who's carving patterns into a hardened cacao cake, not for use, just for fun. She adds a sunburst, then a spiral, then presses a tiny flower into the surface, decorative chocolate long before the Swiss caught on. You ask someone if they ever tire of cacao. The man beside you shrugs and says, "Can you tire of water?" Then, almost as an afterthought, even the gods need their favorites. A traveling healer arrives near dusk. She carries small pouches of dried herbs, stone grinders, and one prized gourd of cured cacao paste. She treats minor ailments with mixtures of plants and chocolate, one for stomach cramps, another for sleeplessness. Her hands work calmly, efficiently. Someone nearby whispers. She even used cacao to bless a newborn once, just by placing a warm cup beside the crib and whispering the child's name into the steam. You believe it? Everything about cacao in this village feels less like a food and more like a language, one with flavors instead of words, rituals instead of punctuation, a language that welcomes everyone, child, elder, scribe, visitor, and says the same thing: "You're home. Have a sip." As night falls again, the fire returns, not for ceremony, not for festival, just to light the center of the village, to warm the hands of tired workers, and to boil one last pot. Tonight's drink is simple: no chili, no flowers, no smoke, just water, cacao, and time. You cradle the gourd in your palms. It's heavier than you expect. Warm, fragrant, honest. You sip, and for the first time since arriving, you forget to analyze the flavor. You just let it settle. Around you, people talk softly or not at all. Some lean against walls. Some rest their chins on their hands. A few children sleep already, half covered in woven blankets. You stay awake a little longer, the taste still on your tongue, and listen to the fire murmur like an old friend. The next day begins in silence, not the absence of sound, but a kind of communal hush, as if the entire village is listening. You walk through the jungle path with a small group bound for a sacred site. Not a temple, exactly. Not a city, just a clearing, stone-marked and story-heavy, nestled where trees seem to lean inward protectively. Here, chocolate isn't sipped, it's carved. You crouch beside an elder who unfurls a scroll, thin bark paper covered in tightly inked glyphs, each curve coiling with meaning. The central image is unmistakable: a cacao tree, roots tangled with skulls, branches supporting gods mid-transformation. One deity rises from a pod, eyes closed in meditation. Another stirs liquid from a jaguar-shaped vessel. These aren't just decorative, they're instructional. Glyphs taught not only language, but values, rituals, myths, and the cacao tree was inked into all of them. Its appearance across the Maya world was consistent, vertical, central, deeply rooted, not just a food source, a world tree. You run your fingers across the carvings etched into the surrounding stones. Many depict scenes you now recognize: the pouring of chocolate between vessels, the grinding on a metate, the frothing ritual, even trade. But others are stranger, more symbolic. One shows a god bleeding cacao pods from his skin. Another shows twin brothers offering a steaming cup to the underworld lord, who frowns as though unsure whether to drink or scold. Historians still argue whether these images represent literal rituals or metaphorical cosmology. Was the cacao drinking in the myths part of actual temple rites? Or were the stories told about chocolate more important than the acts themselves? The line is blurred, purposefully so. A scribe leans toward you and explains that, in the Popol Vuh, the sacred Quiche Maya text, cacao appears during key scenes, not as a starring role, but as a quiet companion to transformation. When gods reshape themselves, when brothers traverse the underworld, cacao is there, watching, waiting. One quirky image on a column catches your eye: a woman, possibly a noble, holding a bowl from which tiny wings emerge. A scribe nearby shrugs and says, "Some say that's the spirit of cacao escaping. Others say it's just a butterfly who got nosy." You like both theories, especially the second. Inside the carved stone walls of the shrine, a painted mural stretches along one curved surface. It's faded but intact: a scene of dancers, mid-movement, each holding cacao pods, as if balancing the world itself. Their costumes mimic tree bark and flower petals. You realize they're not just holding cacao, they're becoming it. You take a seat near the outer circle of listeners as the elder begins to chant, not loudly, but with a steady rhythm. His voice isn't musical, it's low, dry, like leaves being ground. Each word seems designed to fall into the soil rather than rise into the air. He speaks of the first cacao, the one that grew not from seed, but from sorrow, a gift from a grieving god who could no longer speak, so offered taste instead. Later, you sit beside a boy copying glyphs onto clay tablets. His instructor explains that even apprentices must memorize the cacao-related glyphs before any others, not because they're simple, but because they're central. You peer at his work. Some glyphs look like tiny cups, others like pods, still others like people half emerging from trees. You watch him press his stylus into the clay, each line steady and precise. This, too, is a form of planting. Someone calls your attention to a new carving on an outer stone slab. Fresh, still rough-edged. It shows a family offering cacao at a burial. The style is modern, if such a word exists here, but the message is ancient. You recognize the pose of the figures, the tilt of the bowl, the careful rendering of the foam. Even in stone, it bubbles faintly. The glyphs surrounding the scene speak of continuity, of cycles, of flavor as memory. One elder taps her staff against the carving and says, "So long as someone remembers the taste, the story will return." You don't know if she means myth or recipe, possibly both. As dusk filters in through the leaves, the elders unwrap small cacao discs and pass them around, not to drink, just to hold, to smell. Each disc is pressed with a unique mark, a leaf, a spiral, a jaguar's paw. They aren't currency, they're keepsakes, memory, hardened and hand-pressed. You receive one. Yours is marked with a moon and a small, rising pod. Someone whispers, "New beginnings." The wind picks up, rustling the fronds above. Smoke curls from a small brazier. You look around the clearing, at the murals, the glyphs, the carvings, the people, and realize you're surrounded by chocolate, not just as substance, but as symbol. You place the disc into your pouch, resting beside the last few beans you haven't spent. You won't trade this one. It's not for sipping, it's for remembering. The morning you leave the village, your pack is a little heavier, not with gear or treasure, but with gifts. A folded cloth of dried cacao paste, a carved wooden spoon shaped like a hummingbird, a small bundle of dried flowers used to scent chocolate, and at the very bottom, that disc marked with a moon. You didn't ask for any of them. They were just pressed into your hands, one, by people who had seen you watching closely. You follow a path worn smooth by bare feet, hooves, woven sandals. It winds through jungle, over streams, and into new settlements. But cacao travels with you, not just physically. It lingers in your thoughts, in your scent, in the rhythm of your footsteps. You're beginning to understand how it moved, how it spread. Trade routes fan out across Mesoamerica, like quiet veins connecting diverse lands. Called Sakbiob, white roads, some were paved with limestone and glowed under moonlight. Others were little more than flattened dirt paths, shaded by ceiba trees. You follow both. The goods carried along them included obsidian, salt, jade, feathers, and always cacao. At a riverside village, you stop to rest. A merchant offers you a cup of maize chocolate drink thickened with chia seeds. You hesitate, you chia, but one sip and you're hooked. It's cooling, earthy, and oddly energizing, turns out. Cacao and chia were travel partners long before smoothie bowls gave them a second career. Historians still argue Whether the Maya actively encouraged cacao's spread or if it simply moved via the everyday mechanisms of trade, migration, and shared ceremony. But by the late Classic period, cacao appears everywhere, from the Chiapas highlands to the Yucatan Peninsula. Its footprint is muddy but unmistakable. You arrive next in a highland village where the air is cooler, thinner. The cacao here is different, shorter pods, paler pulp, but it's still cacao. The farmers call it by a different name, speak a different dialect, but the reverence is the same. One elder insists their trees are descended from the first garden, the one planted by the rain god himself. You don't argue. One quirky detail you learn at this altitude in colder regions. Cacao was sometimes mixed with ground avocado pit, not for flavor, but for texture. It thickened the drink, made it feel more substantial. You try a sip, it's interesting, like drinking the inside of a walnut shell. You politely finish the cup. You stay for a few days, helping harvest pods that grow lower to the ground. The trees here are more finicky, less shade tolerant, slower to fruit. But the farmers are patient. They sing to the trees while working. You're not sure if it helps, but you're also not sure it doesn't. One evening, a woman shows you a codex fragment wrapped in layers of cloth. It's brittle, but the image is clear, a cacao pod painted as if it were a beating heart. Not metaphorically, literally. Arteries, veins, aorta. They believed it carried life, she whispers, even when dry. At the next settlement, a caravan arrives from the coast. Their beans are salt-kissed, almost smoky. One trader offers chocolate blended with crushed seaweed. You brace yourself, but it's not terrible, salty, umami, confusing in a way that lingers. He shrugs. It's what we have. You finish the cup and nod with cautious respect. As the weeks pass, you realize cacao doesn't belong to any single region anymore. It's a traveler, a shapeshifter. In some places, it's sacred. In others, medicinal. Elsewhere, it's casual, even playful. You meet a group of teenagers who've developed a game where they challenge each other to drink increasingly spicy cacao brews. The current record holder added ants. You decline. One settlement uses cacao to greet the dead. Another uses it to begin festivals. A third mixes it with fermented maize to toast new construction. You begin to see cacao not as a recipe, but as a thread binding beliefs, weaving across languages and landscapes. You sip different cups in different contexts, and each time the bitterness is familiar, like a friend with 1,000 faces, but the same quiet voice. You climb a ridge overlooking the river. From here, you can trace the old road disappearing into the trees. Somewhere out there, someone else is grinding cacao, heating water, testing spices, maybe right now, maybe at sunrise, maybe always. You pull your pouch from your pack. The moon disk is still inside. You hold it for a moment, then press it to your forehead like you saw the villagers do, not out of belief, necessarily, just out of respect, and maybe something close to gratitude. As the wind shifts, you catch the scent again, that subtle, bittersweet note that seems to live in your very breath now. It's not chocolate, exactly, not the kind you grew up with, but it's what came before, what traveled ahead, what waited, and what still waits. As your journey winds further northward, the terrain begins to change. The jungle thins, the air dries, trees grow shorter, scrappier. You begin to see signs of another empire rising, the Toltec. Different language, different architecture. But then there it is again, that unmistakable scent drifting through a market square. Bitter, earthy, warm. Cacao has arrived here too, in the Toltec capital. The marketplace is loud and bright, nothing like the soft-spoken villages you passed through. Vendors shout prices, parrots squawk, a drumbeat tumbles through the crowd like spilled marbles, and still, amid all that chaos, chocolate remains strangely quiet. You watch a vendor pour it from a height so precise it looks choreographed. She adds dried rose petals and powdered bark. When she hands you the bowl, she says, "Drink with your nose first." So you do. It smells like dust and perfume. The taste thinner than Maya cacao, but fragrant, almost smoky sweet. You sip again, just to be sure. Historians still argue whether the Toltec learned cacao traditions directly from the Maya or developed their own through contact, trade, or spiritual osmosis. But by 1000 CE, cacao was deeply embedded in Toltec life, economically, ritually, and socially. One carved relief catches your attention, a priest holding a cacao bowl before a towering idol. Not a gift to the gods, but a drink with the gods, equal footing. That's a new twist. Later, a scribe tells you a curious detail in some Toltec ceremonies. Cacao was offered before blood, as if its essence paved the way for more serious offerings, symbolic, perhaps, or strategic. It softens the gods, he says, and the worshippers, one evening. You're invited to a feast, not royal, but important, a gathering of scribes, merchants, and a handful of warriors returned from patrol. Each guest is handed a cacao bowl as they arrive, not because they're thirsty, but because it's proper. The drink is thinner here, slightly fermented, with hints of dried chili and something almost metallic. You sip slowly, you nod politely, your lips tingle. A woman beside you explains that in this region, cacao is believed to sharpen memory. If you forget something, she jokes, you didn't drink enough. Her grin reveals 3 missing teeth and a streak of blue paint across her cheek. You believe her? One quirky footnote you pick up from a vendor. There was a brief period when cacao was used as ink, mixed with other pigments. It made a reddish-brown dye for codices. Temporary? Yes. Fickle? Yes. But it left a trace. Even the records, it seems, were once sweetened. You notice changes in the drinking vessels, too. Here, they're squatter, heavier, less ornamented. One elder laughs and says, "Maya liked to show off. We like to sip." The tone is teasing, not unkind, but the Point Lands cacao is being reshaped, not just copied, rewritten. You move again, this time into the vast, dry plateau where the Aztec Empire would later bloom. But even before the Aztecs rise, cacao is making inroads. You see it in merchant stalls, in dried bundles, in the murals beginning to favor bold lines and warrior deities, in the shift from jungle to city. A trader tells you that cacao in this region is often mixed with dried maize and salt, more a meal than a ritual. Soldiers carry cakes of it wrapped in cloth, for energy, he says, and for comfort. You walk the outskirts of a temple compound. In a group of initiates, prepare cacao offerings laced with wild tobacco and ground seed pods. The air smells like fire and pepper. One initiate whispers that these are offerings to Tlazolteotl, goddess of purification and desire. The cacao, He adds, reminds her we're still worth forgiving. You keep that one in your pocket as you move through these shifting cultures. The deeper truth becomes clear. Cacao doesn't resist change. It adapts in every region. It becomes something slightly new while still keeping something old. A bitter core, a whispered memory. Even the word begins to change. You hear cacao become cacahuatl in Nahuatl tongues. Different sounds, same root. Language doing what it always does, stretching, remixing, making room for taste. You stay one last night in a hillside village. A girl brings you a bowl of the local mix, cooled cacao with honey and dried cactus fruit. The drink is odd, tart, bright, but it sits well with you. You ask her where her family learned the recipe. She shrugs. My grandmother says it was a gift from the forest. But we don't have forests anymore. You sip quietly. The sun sets fast here. You watch as her little brother scrapes the last foam from the bowl with his fingers. The girl doesn't scold him. She does the same. You follow suit. The flavor clings to your lips long after the cup is empty. You don't notice the change at first. The signs are subtle. More wool clothing, more metal tools, a new accent in the way people say cacao. But then someone hands you a cup that's sweet, not honey sweet, sugar sweet, and that's when it hits you. The Spanish have arrived. You're standing in a small coastal settlement, and the locals speak of ships, tall ones, made from strange smelling wood, floating like mountains, and men, stranger still, wearing heavy skins that clink when they walk. They come hungry, curious, demanding. The cacao here is being prepared differently now. Some still make it the old way, bitter, spiced, sacred, but in certain homes, the drink is being altered, thinned, boiled, sweetened, tamed. You sip the new version and feel confused. It's delicious in a way that sneaks up on you, but it also feels distant, like someone took a poem and rewrote it in lowercase. Historians still argue whether it was Hernan Cortés or one of his friars who first brought cacao back to Europe. What's clear is that they didn't bring it as an exotic drink. They brought it as power. Cacao quickly moved from temple to courtroom, from sacred to sophisticated. In one courtyard, a Spanish monk experiments with cacao preparation. He stirs with exaggerated care, muttering to himself. He's added cane sugar from the Caribbean, cinnamon from Ceylon, and something he calls peppercorn. He sips and pauses. Less fire, he says. More silk. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. A Maya elder nearby watches him with a face carved from stone. She does not interrupt, but later. She scoffs to you, they're boiling it too long. No respect for the spirit. She pours you her version, thick, warm, spiced with crushed ear flour. No sugar, only memory. You taste it. The difference is night and morning. Hers tastes like forest. His tastes like furniture polish with ambition. Still, the Spanish are relentless. They write about cacao in letters home. They marvel at its value, its bitterness, its ceremonial power. But mostly, they wonder how to make it profitable and palatable. So they do what colonizers always do, reinterpret. The froth disappears. The sacred vessels are replaced by cups lined with silver. They strain the grit. They silence the chili. Soon, cacao becomes a luxury commodity. Beans are harvested under new systems, forced labor, quotas, plantations. You hear whispered stories of people taken from their homes to grow cacao for foreign governors. Not honored, not thanked, just used. One man shows you a coin engraved with a ship and a cacao pod. It's the new currency, he says. Tastes of profit. He doesn't smile, but still, in corners, the old ways survive. In hidden gardens, cacao is still sung to. In kitchens behind shuttered windows, the drinks are still frothed by hand, spiced with flowers instead of formulas. The culture doesn't vanish. It adapts, quietly, like it always has. One fringe story you hear from a grizzled scribe, a Spanish noblewoman in Veracruz, became obsessed with Maya cacao rituals. She insisted on being served her chocolate while kneeling, with incense burning and conch shells playing nearby. Everyone laughed, except her. She said, "If you change the recipe, at least remember the spirit." Her servants didn't know whether to roll their eyes or take notes. By now, cacao has crossed the ocean. You hear tales of salons in Madrid where aristocrats sip chocolate with curled mustaches and unread books. They mix it with milk, call it elegant, and never once acknowledge the jungle that birthed it. You don't blame them. Exactly. But you don't admire them either. In one port town, you meet a ship's cook experimenting with something wild: cacao mixed with ground almonds and sugar, then poured into a mold and chilled. It snaps when he breaks it. He laughs. One day, people will eat it like bread, he says. You believe him? You wander back to the coast, bowl in hand. The waves crash softly. Someone offers you a drink. You accept. It's halfway between old and new, still dark, still spiced, but with a curl of sweetness at the end. You sip and nod. It's not betrayal, it's evolution. As the moon rises, you stare at the water and think about all the hands cacao has passed through: the farmers, the scribes, the priests, the warriors, the brides, the monks, the merchants, the ship captains, the children, the strangers, the gods. And now, you make landfall now in a different world entirely. Europe smells of soot and salt. The buildings rise taller than the trees you knew, and the air is thick with clanging bells, shouting vendors, and the heavy perfume of ambition. This is Seville, or maybe Antwerp, one of the ports where chocolate first walks onto cobblestones in wooden crates and earns its passport through curiosity. But something's changed. People no longer ask, "What is cacao?" They ask, "How do I get more?" You watch a well-dressed nobleman sip from a porcelain cup trimmed in gold. The drink inside is warm, brown, and slightly sweet. He praises its invigorating bitterness and then promptly adds 2 more spoons of sugar. You glance at the servant who prepared it. Her expression is unreadable. Historians agree the Spanish were the first Europeans to truly embrace chocolate, but it spread fast, from Spain to France, Italy, England, and beyond. By the mid-1600s, chocolate houses competed with coffee and tea houses for fashionable attention. You stroll past one in London, the sign painted with cacao pods and cherubs, because nothing says sacred Mesoamerican tradition like flirty European babies holding spoons. Inside, the room buzzes with velvet and powdered wigs. Debate swirls as thickly as the drink. Politics, poetry, profit. Someone argues that chocolate increases animal spirits. Another swears it cures melancholy. A third simply says, "I like how it makes my lips feel." That last one gets a toast. But the drink is different here. The foam is gone, the spices are gone. So is the ritual. It's chocolate, yes, but stripped of its past and dipped in empire. One fringe anecdote floats your way. A French cardinal once banned chocolate from Mass, worried it distracted from worship. A clever noblewoman then held Mass in her salon, chocolate cup in hand, claiming her worship was perfectly focused. You suspect she'd get along with the moon disk elder. You try one of the new European variations, chocolate melted with cream and served over toasted bread. It's lovely. It's also completely unrecognizable. You don't taste forest or fire or stone, you taste kitchen. And butter? A lot of butter. In Italy, a chef stirs melted chocolate into pasta. In Germany, a pharmacist prescribes it for digestive problems. In the Netherlands, someone discovers how to separate cacao butter from powder. In England, the first chocolate bar is molded and wrapped, and in every place, someone writes a poem, a recipe, or a complaint about how it's just not like it used to be. You spend a morning in Paris watching a chocolatier create molded candies shaped like flowers, keys, lions. He dips a truffle into a basin, holds it to the light, and smiles. Art, he says, delicate as love, dark as revenge. You smile back, but all you can think about is how many matates it would take to grind enough paste for that single truffle. Historians still debate who first thought to combine cacao with milk. Some blame the Swiss, others credit an English doctor. What's certain is that once milk entered the mix, chocolate lost what was left of its ceremonial bitterness. It became smooth, predictable, friendly, and profitable. Factories bloom like iron flowers. Chocolate becomes standardized, packaged, sold in neat bricks. Ads promise energy, romance, even moral improvement. Children are taught that cocoa makes them strong. Workers are paid in chocolate bars. Soldiers carry it in rations. You step inside a small general store where rows of wrapped chocolates fill the shelves. A boy stares longingly at a foil wrapped piece shaped like a star. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't know where it comes from. He just wants the taste. You realize then that cacao has done the impossible. It's become anonymous. Once upon a time, each sip had a story, a hand, a song. Now, it has a slogan. One odd little detail you read on a crumpled pamphlet: some early chocolate companies used imagery of Mayan glyphs and Aztec temples on their packaging, not to honor the past, but to sell the exotic. It's cacao as costume, sacred as aesthetic, you sigh. But later that evening, in a small inn near the port, the innkeeper serves you a cup without fanfare. No cinnamon, no cream, just dark chocolate and hot water. Old recipe, she says, from my grandmother's grandmother. They were from Oaxaca. You sip, and for a moment, it's all there again. Earth, smoke, stone, memory. She watches you carefully. Not many ask for this anymore, she says. You finish the cup slowly, wondering if you should tell her about the moon disk in your pouch. You don't. Some things are better left resting quietly in your pocket. The world moves fast. Recipes shift. Markets swell. But somewhere, beneath all the sugar and silk, cacao remembers, and if you're lucky, every now and then, it remembers you too. You step through time once more, but now it's less a journey and more a fade. The places become familiar: supermarkets, factories, cafes, and yet the memory of stone mortars and jungle fires lingers beneath it all, like the echo of footsteps in a long, tiled corridor. Modern chocolate surrounds you. It's in bars, in boxes, in powdered mixes sealed tight with freshness dates and nutritional facts. It's molded into bunnies, hearts, coins. It's drizzled, whipped, chunked, and sprinkled. You walk through a grocery store aisle and find 30 different kinds of chocolate, all legal, shelf stable, and alarmingly smooth, and somewhere between the checkout line and the parking lot. It hits you, all of it began with a tree, not a corporate plan, not a lab, a tree, hidden in the shaded understory of an ancient rainforest, waiting. You unwrap a bar, one of the fancy ones, the kind that brags about percentage and origin. The label says single origin Ecuadorian dark with sea salt. It smells good, complex, still faintly earthy. You taste it. There's bitterness, of course, but also something subtler, something that pulls from deeper places. Historians still debate whether today's chocolate products have any meaningful connection to the Maya gift. Some argue the flavor has drifted too far, the ritual too diluted, but others insist the soul of cacao is still intact. If you're willing to sit still long enough to taste it, you try a different product now, chocolate syrup. You squeeze it into a spoon. It's glossy, sweet, and barely related to what came before. A child would love it. A metate would reject it. But you nod anyway. Every branch has twigs about one quirky bit of modern lore in certain chef circles. The word cacao is now whispered like a prayer, while chocolate is treated like a misbehaving cousin. You overhear a chocolatier say, "We don't make chocolate, we guide it. He's probably serious. You like him anyway." You tour a cacao plantation in Central America, one catering to ethical harvest, organic methods, and sustainable reforestation. The guide hands you a fresh cacao pod. You crack it open. Inside, the pulp glows white, slippery as ever. You try a seed, still tangy, still strange, still the beginning of everything. You spot a small fire at the edge of the field, not ceremonial, just lunch. But next to it, someone is roasting beans in a clay bowl. You watch. The smell is unmistakable. You close your eyes. It takes you back to the village, to the stone bench, to the slow rhythm of grinding paste into meaning. The guide says, chocolate's history is long, but it's not over. You agree. It's still traveling, still adapting, in food, in culture, in language, even in protest. Some farmers today fight for the right to grow their own trees rather than sell to corporations. Their battle is quiet, but so was the cacao tree. And look what it started, back home. You make a cup yourself, just water, cacao paste, a hint of chili. You pour it from bowl to bowl, slowly. The foam is small, but it's there. You sip. The flavor is rough, bold, unpolished, honest. It sits on your tongue like a name you almost forgot. You wonder what the old woman would say, the one who caught foam with a ladle and handed you your first proper cup. You wonder if she'd recognize this drink. You think she might, or she might just smile and say, almost, and that would be enough. You sit quietly, the cup warm between your palms, and let the taste carry you backward, to forests, to festivals, to funerals and marriages and trade routes under starlight, to gods and glyphs and the soft slap of feet on white roads. You sip again, slower. Cacao is still here, not as loud as coffee, not as flashy as sugar, but constant, rooted, adaptable, and still, always, a gift. So now, just rest. Let the taste fade on your tongue, like dusk settling over stone ruins long covered in moss. Let your breath match the rhythm of a wooden spoon stirring chocolate over fire. Let your heart beat slow until it sounds like the padding of bare feet through jungle paths. The cacao tree is still growing somewhere, tucked beneath taller trees, shaded and quiet. Its pods swell and ripen without ceremony. They don't need applause, just time, just stillness, the same kind you're in now. In another time, someone crouches beside a fire, watching the beans roast. She doesn't speak, she just waits. The scent rises, familiar, ancient. You are part of that moment now. Let the past stay warm in your hands, like a drinking bowl passed between friends. Let the stories you've heard tonight, of gods, of trade, of rituals both grand and small, settle like sediment at the bottom of a cup. It's okay if you forget the details. That's how stories work. They steep, they soften, they return when needed, like the bitterness in cacao, like the sweetness too. Now the lights are low, the world is distant, and all that remains is this quiet taste of something older than borders, deeper than language. So close your eyes and let the gift carry you.